In my last video, I talked about how 70% of all TEF writing preparation should be done before the exam. So in this video, as a continuation of that first video, I will be talking about how exactly to prepare your 70% for section A, which is the Fait section. This by far is one of the most difficult videos that I've created on this channel. You'll get to know why in some time. But Fait happen to be one of the most complicated parts of the TEF Canada exam. More complicated than section B of writing, more complicated than even listening or speaking sections. While they have their own challenges, but I think Fait is by far the most challenging part to understand what to do exactly and what gets you that B2 plus or C1 score. So we will be discussing exactly that in this video. So watch till the end and you'll have a very good framework and a very assured way of creating your own Fait which will get you at least a B2 plus in your exam. So let's get started. So what exactly is a fait divers? So a fait divers is essentially an incident that is getting reported in a real French newspaper, and as such it should be in a publishable form. What it means is that you should be able to pick it up and publish it in a French newspaper as it is. And therefore, with this expectation, I think the fait divers section becomes very difficult because number one, you cannot make any grammatical mistakes. All the phrases that you're using have to be immaculate in terms of its grammar and in terms of the way of the punctuations and all those little technical things. And also at the same time, you have to ensure that the tone of your fait divers is something that can be used as a fait divers itself. It cannot be a personal diary entry. It cannot be your opinion. It cannot be anything else, or it cannot be even, let's say, a comic book story that you conjure yourself. It has to be something which can be used in a real newspaper. It has to be something that can be published as it is. With this expectation, the examiner is essentially looking at these elements. Number one, it has to be in a structured format. The way I think of a fait divers is that it has to have a three paragraph structure format. The first paragraph is your opening paragraph, wherein you discuss when it happened, and I'll give you an exact framework that will cover it. The second paragraph is about giving you the reason why it happened and as a consequence, and how the authorities reacted to it and what is happening. And at the end, the last paragraph has to tell the reader what to expect next, or what ended up happening as a result of all these events. So there has to be a sense of conclusion in the third paragraph. So the three paragraph format is a very strong format which will give you all the elements required of a fait divers. At the same time, while maintaining a particular structure, while maintaining immaculate grammar and exactly the correct spellings, you have to ensure that the tone of whatever you're writing is something that is used in a newspaper. Now, along with these requirements, there is also a constraint on fait divers that they have to be between 80 to 100 words. If you surpass that 100 word limit, then in my conversations with professional examiners, they tell us that there is a possibility that you will be penalized for it. Never go above 100 or let's say 120 words maximum, and that is your upper limit. Seriously, you don't even have the time in the real exam to write more than 100 to 110 words, because section B is the real elephant. Although technically speaking it is easier to formulate compared to section A, because section A happens to be a little more complex, but you just don't have the time still to give more than 15 to 20 minutes to writing your fait divers, and you have to devote at least 40 minutes to your section B, because that would really take, in fact it really took me around 45 minutes in my real exam, although I had really prepared only to write it in 30 minutes. But still it took me 15 extra minutes, because things happen on the day of the exam and you got to have that margin. If you end up spending 30 minutes on your fait divers, then it is a very dangerous situation to be in, because perhaps you will not have enough time to complete section B, perhaps you will not have time to come back to section A and B and revise them. And I think revision plays a very crucial role in ensuring that there are no errors in your copy. But regardless, I think 100 word limit is a good word limit, and you should really stick to that. So the framework goes like this. There are 6 questions that you have to answer, and if you answer these 6 questions in a systematic manner, then you will have an entire story to narrate to the TEF examiner. So these are the 6 questions. Number 1 is qui, number 2 is où, then is quand, which is when, after that is quoi, which is what, after that is comment, and in the end is pourquoi. So if you answer these 6 questions, then you will have an entire story to tell the examiner. Now the deal is that after some research, I found that there are essentially only 6 types of fair divas. Any question, any prompt or any other question that you will find on the day of your examination will fit into either of these themes, into one of these themes, not either. So these themes are essentially, number one is accidents, then disasters, then flights. And flights basically means that an 8-year-old boy took his father's car, ran away, or a dog ran away from the owner's apartment or something like that. So someone ran away from somewhere, that is flight. Then you have animals. After animals you have discovery, wherein someone discovered a treasure, or someone discovered, basically like anything got discovered, a mine got discovered, or a person found an unusual thing in their apartment. Something was basically discovered. And at the end is unusual. Unusual is basically a miscellaneous category, which I think usually ends up happening in either of the above 5 categories. So unusual is not that unusual, it is not something out of the blue, but unusual is a category basically that, if you cannot categorize anything in the above 5 categories, then that will fall under unusual. So right off the bat, I think you need to start off your letter by answering où and quand, which is where and when. In my case, I had already assumed that if the prompt does not tell me where it is happening, I'm simply going to assume that it is happening in the quatrième arrondissement de Paris. Because most of the newspapers, I just found that there are these arrondissements or districts in which Paris is divided, and whenever an incident is reported, the newspaper basically starts with saying where it happened, and it usually happened in some arrondissement de Paris. So I had assumed that it will always happen in the quatrième arrondissement de Paris. When it will happen, so it is kind of funny, but my exam was on 12th of April. So I thought that if I'm reporting an incident on 12th of April, then it must have happened either on 10th or on 11th. Now somewhere down the line in my mind, I thought that it's more convenient for it to happen on a Sunday than on a Monday. I don't know why, but it did make sense. So I just always assume that if the prompt is not telling me when it is happening, then it is happening on 10th of April. So I will always say these avril, le dimanche 10 avril. That is what I will say. And right in the first sentence, I will always start by saying this sentence: les faits se sont déroulés dans le quatrième arrondissement de Paris. If I feel that I also need to accommodate quand right away, then I will say les faits se sont déroulés le dimanche 10 avril dans le quatrième arrondissement de Paris. This is a pre-made statement that I will always start my fait divers with. Now there can be some exceptions. If you feel that you have a better sentence, or if you're comfortable with something else, feel free to try that. But this worked for me, so I kept using it again and again. And most of the professional teachers I was working with did not have a problem, and in fact they told me that yeah, this is like a technique that most people follow. They have predetermined openings, and predetermined opening not only to the first paragraph but to the second paragraph as well. But before jumping to the first paragraph, let's decide what is happening in the first paragraph itself. So in the first paragraph, you start off by saying that this is happening in the quatrième arrondissement, or wherever you want it, whenever you want it. And then you have to add 2 more lines, which is essentially I would say a little bit continuation of what is happening. So for example, if let's say a man visited a doctor and found some insects in his stomach, this is like a mock exam question that I've used to practice with, then you need to tell a little bit more about the man, and this is where you answer the quoi. Qua does not refer to objects in here, it refers to like what is happening, like what is the event. So to answer the question of qua in the first, this is where you have to answer it in the first paragraph. So in the first paragraph, you need to kind of detail out a little bit more about who the man is, what is his age, what does he do for a living, and essentially what happened. Like, did he kind of feel some kind of pain in his stomach and therefore went to a doctor? If it was an accident, then what was the car involved? Were there a car and a scooter involved? Was there basically what happened? Like a man went to a dentist or a doctor. So who is the man? What is his age? And what exactly happened? What happened that prompted him to go to the doctor? So in just 2 lines, you just have to answer what happened. Now the deal here is that you need to read enough fait divers for you to basically gradually accumulate the kind of vocabulary that is getting used for answering the what. Because the what will vary from prompt to prompt, we cannot really predetermine it, but we can predetermine the kind of vocabulary that we will be using for kind of describing the qua. moving on to the second paragraph, it is important that we have predetermined openings to these paragraphs, because what is most difficult and time consuming on the day of the exam is to conjure up openings. It is easy for you to fill material once you have the first line in, but it is very difficult for you to start something when you don't have any idea as to where it will start, how it will start, and even why it will start like that. So in the second paragraph, I always used to say, because this is a fait divers and this is a line that used to get used in most newspapers, that selon le communiqué or selon le rapport reçu par notre journal. Basically, based on the report that was received by our newspaper, this is like a fixed line that I will always use to open the second paragraph. This is happening. Now, in the second paragraph, what you have to do from the framework is, if you noticed, we have already answered the question of où in the quatrième arrondissement de Paris. We have already answered the question of quand when we said le dimanche 10 avril. We've already answered the question of quoi, because in the first paragraph that was all about what happened. So we have answered the question of quoi also. Now, essentially, there are only two questions remaining. Number one is pourquoi and the other is comment. And in my opinion, these are the most difficult questions to answer, because you got to use some kind of imagination, you got to use some kind of continuation of the current story for you to be able to conjure up comment and pourquoi. Unfortunately, there are no exact facts that you can fit in every situation, so I cannot create a predetermined framework for this, but I can help you fill the space between those lines of imagination. So we started this paragraph saying that selon le communiqué or le rapport reçu par notre journal, this happened, and when we say this happened, sorry, it is not about this happened, this is that why this happened. So according to our newspaper findings, this happened because of these reasons. So for example, if we were to continue the same example of the mock exam, that a man went to a doctor and found that there were some worms in his stomach, which is very absurd. But like, you can actually continue that by saying that because that man used to eat a lot of junk food and therefore this happened. Now, you don't have to make it very logical or very scientific. You just have to give a good enough reason for a viewer to believe, yeah, it is possible. And even if it is remotely possible, no one really cares, because this is not a test of your medical knowledge. It is a test of how well you can communicate something if it happened. So don't worry much about creating a very realistic or a very sophisticated kind of paragraph that you'll share some findings in here. You don't have to share any findings. You just have to give very general, basic, kindergartenish kind of reason that this is why it happened. So let's assume that this happened because he used to eat a lot of junk food, and therefore like some stuff happened and somehow these worms were in his stomach. And why did it happen? So this is how it happened, because he used to eat a lot of junk. And why did it happen? Because let's say we just have to continue a little bit on why, which is that because these foods are not very good for the health of your stomach, and therefore these worms were there. Now, once you have answered the question of comment and pourquoi, which I don't think you need to use more than 1 or 2 lines. Be very, very wise about this. Do not fill in more details which are necessary. Simply answer comment in one line, simply answer pourquoi in the other line. That's it. Now complete this paragraph by using this standard line, which I at least used to use in all my fait divers, and I encourage you that you do the same, because it's a very C1 level kind of phrase, very newspaperish. So here it goes. Une équipe de policiers va se pencher sur ce sujet ou sur la question, a déclaré une source proche de la famille. Or you can say that if it is not close to a family, then you can say proche de l'événement, someone close to the event. This is where I leave it up to you to kind of fill your own vocabulary, because until you do your own work, you will not be able to assimilate this phrase. So I will leave here by saying that I used to say une source proche de la famille ou proche de l'événement. You can also say that it is a source close to the police, and the vocabulary for that I will leave up to you to find out. Now, after having answered this framework, you just have one last paragraph to kind of conclude your fait divers conclusively, and here is the paragraph. So where it basically says quant à quelqu'un, which is concerning the parents or concerning the neighbors or concerning whoever people were involved in that event, they are basically soulagés, which is that they are happy and they are basically content to learn that everything is fine, So this is like this then becomes a very standard way of concluding your fait divers. So conta quelqu'un, whoever is involved in that event, ils sont soulagés d'apprendre que everything is fine, and this is where you need to kind of use the context of that fait divers. For example, if it was an accident or if it was something which could have been dangerous, then they say that tout le monde est sauf et sain, which means that everyone is safe and sound. And basically these are the vocabulary words that you will kind of learn eventually as you keep practicing. And once you have those vocabulary words, you can fit that in this sentence that I've given out, and then at the end just add one more line to basically say the same thing, which is everything is fine. So this is on the lines of tout est bien qui finit bien, which is that everything is everything that ends well is well, like that English equivalent. And this is how you will be able to safely conclude your fait divers. Now imagine this, you have answered all the questions, therefore you know that you have a logical story, you have these 3 paragraphs, you have pre-made sentences for all those 3 paragraphs, you just need to fill in a line or 2 within these sentences. This framework will work for all kinds of themes of fait divers which are imaginable and not imaginable, which is kind of observed on the day of the exam. Now you just need to learn the vocabulary, which is very fait divers-ish, which is very newspaperish, so that you can fill the context of these phrases, of these structures and whatnot. And this is how you create a very safe copy of your fait divers. Now let me go back to what is essentially a good fait divers. A good fait divers is, number one, structurized. There has to be some structure to the story. So I think the 3 paragraph structure is what will get you through. Then I think there has to be a certain grammatical prowess in your fait divers, that you have to be grammatically correct, while also ensuring that not only you're grammatically correct, but your tone of talking is exactly how a newspaper will talk. So if you have these phrases pre-made, which are kind of taken from real fait divers, and I have given it in the framework, then you are assured that your grammatical prowess is there. Your vocabulary is something that you'll have to develop on your own. So make good vocabulary use. I think the best way of learning vocabulary is that you make your own fait divers, you practice with your own hands, and whenever you get stuck, you go to DeepL and you basically check how to write it in real authentic French. If you haven't seen the video on how to use artificial intelligence and DeepL for improving your French writing, then the link is given in the description and is also linked somewhere above. These 6 themes that I had kind of given out in the beginning are given out so that you can develop vocabulary on a theme by theme basis. So for example, for animals, this is the kind of, you should know the names of different kinds of animals. That is important. For the case of accidents, you need to understand how to report accidents. So read more and more fait divers on the line of those themes, and you will pick vocabulary from those fait divers and fit it into this framework. And this is how I think you can tackle the question of fait divers really effectively. So while grammar is mostly fine for most people, but most people kind of make a lot of spelling errors, and this is true even for native French speakers. People who actually live in France and they have been speaking French since their childhood, they also make a lot of spelling mistakes with accents. And the TEF Canada writing exam really will penalize you if you make more than 3 or 4 errors in your copy. So your upper limit of making orthographic mistake, which is also spelling mistake in plain English, is very limited. Do not make spelling errors. Do not just do that. It will really bring down your score. While grammatical correctness and punctuation and the newspaperish tone is also very important, but this is just like a last parting note that I wanted to tell you, because I was really struggling with my accents. And at the end, till the very end of my exam, even though I knew the vocabulary, even though I knew the word that can fit into it, I was very hesitant to use that word in my real exam, because I did not want to make the mistake of using the wrong accents. Sometimes people tell you that examiners are fine with you making some accent mistakes, but that is not true. I did not want to take that risk and then find out and be disappointed. So the reason why I took 15 more minutes in writing the entire section B and section A is simply because I had to think a lot before using a word. Even though I knew the word, I was not sure about the spelling or the accent. So I had to find a synonym and then go back and use the synonym, and this really ate into the time that I was using. But because I was being very careful, because I had prepared these sentences before entering the examination and I had practiced a lot, this is what saved me. Even though in terms of time management, I also kind of made a few errors here and there, and I had just like 5 minutes to revise section B and section A. But thanks to these frameworks and thanks to the vocabulary that I knew, because I had a good vocabulary, I also knew synonyms which did not involve accents, and because of the framework that I was following, I was able to go through the writing exam and get a C1 in my attempt. To give you an exact idea of how this framework works in the real world and with real prompts, I have attached a PDF to this video in the description, and you can see how I've answered a real prompt systematically using the exact framework, how this framework fits in using a real question, and you can get an idea as to what kind of vocabulary, what kind of words that you would want to learn and create your own feedback. So feel free to download that. It's a Drive link, and that's it. I'll see you in the next video.